Hi, I'm Anne-Marie Mediwake, and I'm here with Lindsey Deluce. Welcome to CTV Your Morning, the podcast.
So this week, we're taking a look at new laws coming into effect in Canada in 2025 and how that's going to impact you. Also coming up, the U.S. Surgeon General has just drawn a much stronger link between alcohol and the risk of some cancers. So we're going to learn more about the concern and what you need to know.
We're also going to look ahead at real estate in 2025, what the trends are and how they're shaping up, whether you're a buyer or a seller.
We want to start with the news that sent shockwaves across the country. The announcement that Prime Minister Justin Trudeau is planning to step down.
Well, now opposition parties are working to make their case against the Liberals, but without Trudeau at the helm. The NDP, we know, is joining the Conservatives and the Bloc in committing to bring down the Liberal government at their next opportunity, which then, of course, would trigger an election. For more this morning, we are joined by former Deputy Conservative Leader and Vice Chair of Global Investment Banking at CIBC Capital Markets, Lisa Raitt. Great to have you back on the show.
Good to see you, Anne-Marie. Thanks.
We're going to go back in time a little bit. You ran for Conservative Leader in 2017 in the race to replace Prime Minister Stephen Harper. As candidates in Ottawa this morning are considering do I, don't I run for leadership, what goes into preparing to run a national leadership race?
So much. And actually, after that leadership race, in which I was not successful, I went on to co-chair the next leadership race. And I was on the other side of the organizing of it. And I can tell you that leadership campaigns are very diligent. They want to make sure that their candidate gets the best possible chance at winning the leadership. So they're going to be very combative with one another. They're going to have a million questions for the leadership. They want to know what the rules are, and they watch each other's campaign to make sure that they're not breaking any of the rules. So it's a very complex situation. And if you're a candidate wondering if you want to put your hat in the ring and become the next leader, you really have to be assured that you are in it, and you are definitely going to have to go through an awful lot of time, an awful lot of compassion for yourself and for your family, but it's quite the involved experience. And you don't do this if you're just even a little bit hesitant. You're either in or you're all in. There's no maybes.
And of course, we've been talking about this shortened timeline all morning long. Listen, Kim Campbell became Prime Minister after Brian Mulroney resigned in June 1993. And then 4 months later, Campbell led the Conservatives into the next election, and the party then just won 2 seats. What does the next Liberal leader need to do to avoid that scenario from repeating itself?
Well, I think the next Liberal leader has to understand and be aware of the fact that it's not just Justin Trudeau that was the problem for the Canadian public, that it was the policies that were implemented by the Liberal Party. So either they're going to be able to communicate why these policies were the right policies, or they're going to be able to distance themselves from the previous government and say that I'm going to do things different going forward. Really difficult for a current sitting member of Parliament to be able to do that, quite frankly, because they have been part and parcel of the entire operation since 2015. And as a result, they will be easily linked to the Justin Trudeau policies that have made Canadians in the situation where they are now, which is wanting to have an election.
How could an outsider like Mark Carney, for example, change that scenario?
He's got to be an excellent communicator, quite frankly. He's got to be able to communicate through the noise around this government, through the dissatisfaction of the government. He's got to set out a hope that there's a way forward, and he's got to be able to touch the hearts and the minds of Canadians across the country who are not feeling very happy at the moment. It is a very, very steep hill for anyone outside the party to climb, let alone somebody from inside the party. So whoever the next leader is, they definitely have their work cut out for them. And I don't think they're going to have the ability to change the outcome, which we seem to be heading towards.
Much of Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre's criticism of this government has centered on Prime Minister Justin Trudeau and his leadership. How could the Conservatives' election strategy be affected by somebody running against somebody other than Justin Trudeau?
Well, you may have seen in the last couple of months, because this has been telegraphed ever since this summer when Mr. Trudeau started losing those by-elections in incredibly safe Liberal seats, the Conservatives have pivoted more into talking about affordability, whether or not you're better off now than you were in 2015, about the concerns that certain parts of our society have in terms of not being able to buy a house, not being able to get ahead. They've done everything that they thought they were supposed to do, and it hasn't panned out for them. The Conservatives will now pin that on the Liberal Liberal Party writ large. It's not going to be just about Justin Trudeau. And as you heard from the clip, that's exactly the path they're taking. They're saying that you may have gotten rid of Mr. Trudeau, or they may have gotten rid of Mr. Trudeau, but the reality is that they're all the same. So that's going to be the message the Conservatives will put out. Same message that the NDP and the Bloc Québécois will push as well.
Lisa Raitt, a former Deputy Conservative Leader and Vice Chair of Global Investment Banking at CIBC Capital Markets. Always great to speak with you. Thanks for coming back on today.
Thanks, Anne-Marie.
Okay, so we just heard from Lisa Raitt, but what does Prime Minister Justin Trudeau's resignation really mean for the Liberal Party? I mean, who's going to be the leader of this? Who's in, who's out?
Still so many questions and not a lot of time. The process of choosing a new leader is underway, but Parliament is prorogued until March 24th. That's weeks away.
It is. Nick Nanos is the chief data scientist at Nanos Research.
Well, Trudeau faced calls to resign months ago. We are now heading into an election year. How did his lingering impact a potential outcome for the next Liberal leader? I think yesterday you called it a poisoned chalice.
Yeah, no, the thing is that for the Liberals, the ballot numbers and their level of support has gone from bad to worse. You know, for over a year, they've had a double-digit disadvantage, trailing the Conservatives. In the week before Justin Trudeau resigned, the Conservatives were at 47%, the Liberals at 21, 26 points back. So what's happened is, and this is especially in the wake of the Chrystia Freeland resignation, the gap between the Conservatives and the Liberals has widened, and it probably put extra pressure on Justin Trudeau and his government to think of something to do, because let's face it, Anne-Marie, they tried attacking Pierre Poilievre. They've tried policies like the HST holiday.
Yeah.
None of those things moved the dial.
Cabinet
the last
shuffle.
thing left was to change the party, and that's where they are right now.
Okay, well, according to the most recent polling then, who would Canadians like to see as the next Liberal leader?
Well, taking Justin Trudeau out of the equation, in the survey that we did the night before he resigned, Chrystia Freeland and Mark Carney would be the two top individuals that Canadians would find the most appealing to lead the Liberal Party of Canada. The interesting thing about this, Anne-Marie, is that over the last number of months, Chrystia Freeland's brand has improved, specifically in the wake of her resignation. So her resignation actually positively helped her brand and has made her a top contender in terms of appeal among average Canadians to lead the Liberal Party of Canada.
Well, I'm glad you brought that up, because during Trudeau's resignation, he chose to remind Canadians how close he was to Chrystia Freeland. Do you think that was an intentional swipe at her leadership chances by reminding Canadians that these two were in tandem for the last decade?
Yeah, it's got to be pretty harsh for him. Like, let's face it, she was Deputy Prime Minister, Minister of Finance, one of his most loyal advisors, and she didn't even knife him in the back. She knifed him in the front and basically precipitated his exit as Prime Minister and leader of the Liberal Party. I thought he was kind of nice, Anne-Marie. He could have actually been much more cruel, and I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that right now for him to interfere in the leadership contest would make him persona non grata within the Liberal Party, even for all that he's accomplished. So I think he was, maybe it was a slight, but I think it could have been much worse. And he's probably, there's a thought bubble, it was probably a little more negative for Justin Trudeau when he was thinking of Chrystia Freeland than what he actually said.
I want to go across the aisle for a moment. Until now, Pierre Poilievre has been shielded by this dislike for Justin Trudeau. You know, as you pointed out, his numbers are, he's had this double-digit lead for, over a year. Conservatives, your latest polling, 47%, Liberals, 21%, and the NDP at 17%. How does Justin Trudeau, that shield of dislike of Justin Trudeau being removed, how does that affect the Conservatives?
Well, I think for the Conservatives, they're probably going to have the same strategy, and that's what we heard from Pierre Poilievre. He said basically it doesn't matter who's leading the Liberal Party, that it's the same old Liberal Party, and for many of those people who are contenders, they voted in favor of all those things. So the Conservatives already have their plan in place. What they have to do is to make sure that they don't mess up, not make a mistake. Because right now they're riding a blue wave of change. The Liberals have been in power for almost 10 years, since 2015. And the Conservatives basically have to do nothing and not make a mistake in order to win the next election and let the car crash currently known as the Liberal Party of Canada continue.
The new year means new laws come into effect in this country, and that includes loan interest rates capped, more rights for gig workers, and new gun laws. So this morning, we're taking a look at the most impactful laws coming into effect in 2025. Joining us this morning on what to expect from the year in Canadian law is lawyer Anne-Marie Mediwake. Great to have you in this morning.
Thank you for having me.
Okay, so our first law that we need to look at, it took effect 2 days ago, so on January the 1st. The federal government has now set a maximum annual interest rate on almost all loans across the country. That rate is now capped at 35%. The cost of payday loans also limited. So walk us through these changes.
Certainly. So this is actually a reform to the criminal code and criminal laws and regulations. And it means that the maximum that a lender can charge for a personal loan is now reduced from 60% to 35%.
So is that 60%? Is that
It used to be 60%.
Wow.
Yes.
Okay, so that's a big change. And then the payday loan as well?
Yeah, so the payday loans, now the maximum that can be charged in terms of interest for a payday loan is $14 for every $100 loaned.
Okay, so this is going to affect millions of Canadians who borrow this way.
Potentially. We don't know whether millions actually borrow this way.
Okay.
These are very rare loans. These are not bank loans. These are non-bank, non-prime loans. And these are usually classified as high-risk loans. So these are individuals who don't normally qualify for traditional loans. And the market for this is quite narrow.
It's quite narrow. Okay. So next up in July, the law around the rights of gig workers will change. So these are people who work in jobs like rideshare, delivery, courier services. What will we see change?
Correct. So what we're seeing is the implementation of the Digital Workers Protection Act. And what that does is it creates minimum standards for individuals who are working in the gig economy. So as you mentioned, through rideshare apps, through delivery systems, it creates a number of protections, including a minimum wage for each assignment. It also prohibits these platforms from withholding tips, and it also forces them to be more transparent and disclose how their fees are earned and transmitted back to the workers.
Okay, so that's set to change. The government, let's talk about gun laws, because the government, we know, has banned close to 2,000 firearms in total. Owners have been told, get rid of those weapons by October 30th. There are different avenues to do that. How will this work?
So currently these guns and new guns were added, new models were added to the list in December, but currently they are illegal. However, there is an amnesty order in effect, which means that those people who, at the time that these weapons were made illegal, lawfully possessed them, so bought them lawfully and had licenses to do so, those individuals have until October to bring themselves in alignment with this new law. So that means that they can either surrender their firearms to their local authorities, their local police, or they can go take it to a gunsmith and have the firearm deactivated, essentially, to make it non-effective as a weapon. And they have until October to do that. If once that expiry date comes into effect, then they will be in violation of the law, and it will be a crime for them to continue possessing these weapons.
I want to ask you about this because oftentimes, when a law comes into place, there is a grandfather clause that happens.
Yes.
That is not happening in this case. Is that unusual?
It's not unusual. I mean, the grandfathering in of provisions and laws usually take place as a discretion that the legislature puts in, usually when there's a question about fairness. Here, what the government has done instead is given a really long runway for people who have these weapons to get rid of them, because ultimately the government wants these to not be floating around in society, and that would be defeated if we allow all people who possess them currently to continue possessing them legally.
The new year is often a time for a new focus on our health, and for a lot of people, the year starts with dry January.
And then there was this news that came out, right, out of the U.S., the U.S. Surgeon General drawing a strong link between alcohol and the risk of seven different types of cancer. He says it is a leading cause of preventable cancer deaths.
A new warning in the U.S. is drawing a direct connection between how much alcohol you drink and the risk of cancer. The warning comes from U.S. Surgeon General Dr. Vivek Murthy, who says alcohol is the third leading cause of preventable cancer in the U.S., causing thousands of deaths a year. Joining us this morning on alcohol's link to cancer is Dr. Christine Bresden-Masley. She's a medical oncologist at Mount Sinai Hospital. Welcome to Your Morning.
Thank you.
This warning follows reporting that was first released in France back in 2015. It has been almost 10 years, the message finally being highlighted in the States. Where is the link between alcohol and cancer?
Well, we certainly know that alcohol itself, when it gets metabolized in the body, leads to this carcinogen, acetaldehyde, and that has direct DNA damage. And when this happens, there can be genes that are then affected, and there is increased cell growth, and that is how tumors develop. So unfortunately, the more you drink, the more alcohol there is, the more this metabolite, the more DNA damage. And so that is the causal link right now that has been well known for several years, as you mentioned.
Are there certain cancers that are more prone to this link to alcohol, or is this cancers across the board?
Well, cancers across the board, but as in the statement that came out, obviously there's a higher link with breast cancer, really the aerodigestive tract, so esophageal, colorectal cancer, mouth cancer. So there were 7 that were identified that had more of a direct link. It's kind of the story of smoking and lung cancer. I don't think a patient who has smoked for a long time who develops lung cancer would ask you, did smoking cause lung cancer?
I remember when that report first came out in France, and we did a segment here on the program, and I was asking, why don't more Canadians know about this? And one of the reasons given was because there are powerful lobby groups for alcohol here in this country, and that we link in this country every celebration to alcohol. In fact, there was a report out last year, 40% of Canadians say they're unaware of the health risks that come with alcohol. So what then can be done to raise awareness?
Well, I think that, one aspect, one strategy, obviously the fact that 40% aren't aware that there is this causal link, is that there is an opportunity to educate and make awareness. And one of the strategy is putting warning labels on every piece of alcohol or every bottle of alcohol that is to be consumed, so that individuals know what their risk is. They can make an informed decision. And as you mentioned, it is a socialized, aspect of our day-to-day life. And so this will be definitely a challenge, but there are opportunities and strategies to educate the public.
When I look at Gen Z, who are known as the sober curious generation, they are drinking less than young people in the past, than Gen Xers or even boomers. How will this affect future cancer rates?
Well, we'll see. We have this lag time of decades where we actually see the changes occurring. And hopefully the fact that now that there are non-alcoholic beverages, non-alcoholic beer, for example, that there is this opportunity that hopefully we will see a decrease in some of these cancers that are linked to alcohol.
I think for people who are maybe hearing about this for the first time or starting to be more concerned when they see a warning come from the U.S. Surgeon General, how direct is the link? And I remember having a conversation once where somebody said that the link between alcohol and cancer is the same as between sun exposure and skin cancer. Is it that direct?
Well, it can be. I mean, you've heard of individuals who drank for decades and don't get cancer, for example. I mean, it's multifactorial. This is one aspect. An individual can have a genetic makeup that makes them more prone to develop cancer. Environmental factors, and this is an environmental factor. This is a risk that we can decrease over time by decreasing alcohol intake or completely abstaining. And I think the individual, we have to know what that risk is, and we have to make the proper decision in our lives. And I think being aware of that risk is the first step.
Would you like to see, or have we had a warning similar to what we've seen from the U.S. Surgeon General here in Canada?
Yeah, I think as I said, there is an opportunity. The fact that, you stated 60% of individuals, 40% of individuals are not aware. So that means we have 60% that we can make a difference. And whether or not there will be labels put on products, more and more advocacy to decrease your alcohol intake or stop your alcohol intake. Hopefully this will make a difference.
Thank you for listening to Your Morning, the podcast. You can also watch our show live weekdays, 6 to 9 a.m. Eastern, 7 to 10 a.m. Atlantic. You'll find us on CTV CTV News Channel or on your CTV News app.
So I'm going to say the Canadian real estate market kept us guessing in 2024. And, with interest rate cuts not quite delivering the rebound people were expecting, or many people were hoping for, we're now looking ahead to 2025.
Yeah, and there are new mortgage rules, there's new tax policies. So what does all of this mean for buyers and sellers this year? Real estate expert Erica Reddy explains.
I'm going to say this past year was a bit of a hard one to pin down in Canadian real estate. Everyone was watching interest rate cuts with the hopes that it would lead to a rebound, but 5 cuts during the year didn't have the impact people were hoping for. So now here we are into 2025, into a new year. New rules for mortgages, new rules for taxes. So what can we expect to see in Canada's real estate market in 2025? Joining us with her thoughts is real estate expert Erica Reddy. Happy New Year. Nice to see you.
Happy New Year. Nice to see you.
Before we look forward, I want to take a look back because 2024, it was a year where affordability, that was top of mind for so many Canadians. How did that conversation play out in the Canadian real estate market?
Absolutely. So I think it's no secret at this point in time, 2024 was a tough year for Canadians and then for Canadians in real estate. And the market was a lot more sluggish than people anticipated. And as you mentioned earlier, we did have 5 rate cuts, but those rate cuts didn't start until June. And I think at that point they were delayed. And then they were aggressive. We went from the high of 5% to 3.25. But people, I think, were still really struggling with the overarching ability to afford Canadian real estate.
Absolutely. Now, the federal government, as we know, is making big changes to housing policies this year. How is all of that going to play out market-wise?
So, I think that's a really positive step for the market. The 2 big ones being first-time buyers and new builds can stretch their amortization from 25 years to 30 years. So therefore, they're going to be able to reduce their monthly payments. And in addition to that, you've got the higher mortgage insurance cap. And I think that's truthfully, that's the big one, because that's where all of a sudden you've got bandwidth to go from $1 million to 1.5. And so if you're hypothetically buying your first property, let's say for 1.2 million, and your original down payment prior to this would have been 240,000, now it's sitting at 95,000.
That's huge.
Huge.
Yeah. And really it opens up the market for people, right?
Absolutely. And I think too, when you look at buying a property in Canada, a lot of our major cities, $1 million unfortunately doesn't get you a lot. And so with that cap at $1 million, it really didn't allow people to get in. So I think this $500K will make a huge difference to first-time home buyers.
So let's set the scene for 2025. What are you hoping to see this year?
So, a lot of the forecasts, a lot of the predictions are saying that we're probably going to see an increase both in sales volume and in dollar. So the overall average, sale. So I think this is really, really great. I think, unfortunately, we're not going to see it rebound as quickly as everybody's thinking. I think it might take a little bit longer. It might be more into Q2, but I still think, nonetheless, we've got a rebound on the horizon.
When we are saying people are hoping, but what about buyers out there? Is this a good time to get in the next couple of months?
I think this is a phenomenal time because if we look at kind of what we've talked about, everybody's typically a little bit late to the game. So once the market picks up, that's when everybody wishes they got in. But at this point, if buyers are getting in now, I think there's huge opportunity before the market picks up.
So what kind of advice do you have for buyers?
I think first and foremost, you want to set a realistic budget. You want to know what can you afford and make sure that it's within, your bandwidth. You don't want to be buying a house and becoming house poor. So that's really, really important. And then take your time. Make sure you're really getting what you want, set your criteria, and don't compromise.
And I think right now there's this window of opportunity where you can take a little bit more time because as you were talking about toward the end of the year, I think it's going to be a completely different landscape that we're looking at.
Absolutely. So I think now time is on your side. Get your feet wet, and then you'll have the ability to make a really educated decision when the right house comes up.
So that's for the buyers. Let's talk about the selling side. What advice do you have for people?
So I think, again, timing is everything. And I think there is a window of opportunity now because as we've just talked, buyers, I think, are going to be anxious about how Q2 starts to pan out. And they're going to want to get in the market. But right now, there's not a lot of great supply. So if you are the seller that is the great house, the great offering, I think there is huge opportunity because it is a little bit of that supply demand. And if you're the only one, and the buyers are there, there's opportunity to be had.
And I see on our board right now, get ready to list in Jan, Feb. You can do it too. You think you can't do it, but you can do it.
Yes.
You can get it ready.
I love January and February personally.
And if you are planning to buy your first home or even your dream home this year, in 2025, you are going to need a solid financial plan to back those goals up.
Yeah, but you know what, New Year, a lot of people make these resolutions, right? A lot of them have to do around financial goals. It sounds great, but The issue is like keeping them,
Yeah.
right? Keeping those goals in place. That's where many people stumble, whether it's, saving smarter, spending better. Certified financial planner Martha Adams helps us figure out how to make those goals stick.
All right, first of all, it was Oprah who said that if you have an idea without intention, then it's just a dream. So what is the first step to creating financial goals in 2025 that will last, that we will follow through on?
So start with the positive is so key. So to do that, focus on what it is that you want to create for yourself. Now, doing that means you are taking an appreciative view of yourself. I say that because often when we're setting financial goals specifically, we're starting with the negative, focused on what we don't want or what we've done wrong in the past. So that's very depreciating, right? So that's going to kind of put our foot on the brake pedal right off the hop. So here's a non-financial kind of visual of that. So let's say that you're going to the gym and you're walking in those doors speaking negatively about yourself, right? Chances are you're not going to have the best experience and probably not the best workout either. So the way that we feel directly impacts our results, and our finances are no exception to that.
Okay, so stay positive.
Absolutely.
How can we help create positive and motivated feeling for our goals?
So what I would say there is to build your own emotional associations with your goals. And that's going to help you do a really key thing, which is make your goals your own. So you want to give them meaning, value, and purpose that belong to you. Here are 3 questions that you can ask yourself to help.
Okay.
First, why is this goal meaningful to you?
Okay.
Second, how does it add value to your life? And then when it comes to purpose, what purpose is this goal serving in your life? So those questions are going to help you make them your own and really anchor in those positive emotional
And
associations.
again, reinforce that this is something positive, that we're moving in a direction that brings benefit. Okay. What is something that you'd recommend when someone is putting numbers to their goals?
So I would say make sure that it is both sustainable and trackable given your current circumstances. So ultimately not biting off more than we can chew, if that makes sense, and make sure then when you are putting numbers to it that you're breaking those numbers down. So if, for example, for easy numbers, let's say your goal for the year is $12,000. That $12,000 can be towards anything, whether that's growing your investments, allocating towards travel, whatever it may be. And then you want to break those down into bite-sized pieces. So that $12,000 a year is $1,000 a month, or $250 a week. A pro tip there, again, make sure you can track it. Use an app or a spreadsheet to help. And then with that as well, celebrate your wins as you go. That's gonna help you keep your foot on the gas, acknowledging the work that you've done.
You said to keep track of, or to use tracking tools and celebrate your wins. What are some of the tracking tools that you like to use?
There are a lot that are out there. There are ones that can connect right to your bank account. So one like Mint is a great one. And there are actual banks that have tracking tools that connect right to your account that you can utilize for free. So, great tools like that to use.
While I have your expertise here, do you have a secret ingredient for long-term success?
I do. It is a secret, but we're gonna unleash the secret.
Okay,
now.
I like that. Thanks, Martha.
And so it's the idea of a picture is worth 1,000 words, and it couldn't be more true in this to set a positive emotional anchor, because when you're looking at your meaning, value, and purpose, find an image that represents that for you and put it somewhere that you're going to see it all the time. That's going to not only keep your foot on the gas, but remind you that this goal really is for you and why it's for you.
So a physical, like you want an actual picture, like something on your fridge or on your phone?
Yes, exactly. Your fridge, your phone, on your desk, whatever it may be, wherever that you're going to see it often, and remind yourself of your goal often.
I want to remind people again, and I love the acronym MVP. What is it? Meaning, value, and purpose.
Yes.
For your financial goals. These were great tips. Martha, thank you.
Thank you for having me.
So back in 2005, Ontario set a target of becoming fully accessible within 20 years. Here we are, 2025, Deadline is here, and it hasn't happened.
So Chris Stigas is the founder of Handy Help, and we know he's been on the front lines of fighting for real accessibility for years now. This was so surprising. He said 90% of buildings or businesses are just one step away from being fully accessible. And he helps us unpack what still needs to happen.
In 2005, Ontario set a 20-year goal to become fully accessible. Now, guess what? It's 2025. 20 years later, advocates say the province is nowhere near that goal. The standards set in the Accessibility for Ontarians with Disabilities Act, they were meant to cover everything from wheelchair accessible buses and taxis to accessible customer service to improved public design. But progress to implement most of those changes has been really slow. Joining us for a closer look at Ontario's accessibility goals is Chris Stigas, accessibility consultant and founder and brand developer of Handy Help. Good to have you on today. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.
We're not where we thought we'd be, though. Right?
Not exactly.
Yeah, not exactly. We spoke to you at around this time last year, and at that time you expressed concerns about Ontario not reaching the goal by 2025. Here we are. Where are we at?
There's a lot of stuff that still hasn't changed and a lot of things that are not accessible. Yes, there's been improvements with new infrastructure and new buildings and new station and new buses, but a lot of the existing infrastructure is still not accessible.
You were on a committee that proposed accessibility changes to the province for healthcare, education. These two areas have been slow, right? Like pretty slow to progress to implement those standards. What needs to be done in those fields?
We really need to put more emphasis to get these buildings retroactively made accessible. So whether that's funding or grants to help identify where these barriers are in the existing built environment and really start solving those problems and addressing those buildings.
How much further do we need to go to get everything accessible? I mean, is this a long runway here?
I think it's a long runway. The municipal transit system still has about a third of the stations that are not accessible. Even myself, recently on one of the major hospitals, I went to go get my foot x-rayed, and the machine is not accessible.
Really?
To help me get an x-ray. And even going for an eye exam, the machines are not accessible. They're very difficult to get up to. So even though the building might be accessible and you're able to get in, then the services that are offered within the building are not accessible, and those haven't even been touched on yet.
And am I guessing that you didn't know that till you got there?
I didn't know that till I got there. I thought I was going to a hospital and I'd be able to get my foot. So I had to be sent to a different clinic and, another 2 or 3 weeks until I had an appointment.
Right, because there's a lot of lead time on that stuff.
Yeah.
And the personnel the healthcare workers that are working there, I mean, it's sort of out of their hands too, right?
Yeah, he was just as surprised as I was. So that was a little bit shocking, but something to bring up with government and with advocacy groups like Spinal Cord Injury Ontario. They have a person on staff that has a direct line of communication that's always open to the government that helps affect policy, and they advocate for people with disabilities.
We reached out to the Ministry of Seniors and Accessibility for comment on this. And the statement I'll read in part for our viewers. Ontario is meeting, achieving, or exceeding AODA standards. The AODA required Ontario to have accessibility standards in place by 2025. There are currently standards in the areas of information and communications, employment, transportation, the design of public spaces, customer service. We will continue to work with our partners beyond 2024. So you're smiling a little bit. When you hear that, what do you think?
I think that those are all great, but they're all new things moving forward. And that's the expectation. That's like saying, we put in traffic lights at the intersection. Well, that's how intersections safely operate for everybody.
Yeah.
So of course these things, as great as they are, they're new things moving forward. What we want to see is existing infrastructure and buildings. 90% of buildings or businesses that are not accessible because of one step. So what about some programs to help make these places accessible?
Okay, we're going to switch gears a little bit to something wild. Linz, remember murder hornets?
Yeah.
They were those terrifying, oversized wasps. They have this stinger that can go through a beekeeper's outfit. They really had people freaked out a couple years ago.
The old beekeeper outfit.
That's right.
Their protective gear. I know, these things are they were too big. Well, put this one in the win column. North America has now eradicated the murder hornet. Yeah. CTV science and tech expert Dan Riskin tells us whether we can finally stop looking over our shoulders.
Okay, well, in order to highlight why it's a good news story, let's talk about the bad news of murder hornets. They can destroy a honeybee hive in 90 minutes. What else makes them so dangerous?
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of their specialty, is to go in and attack other insects and eat their larvae. And so they have a coordinated system of going into a beehive, killing all the bees, eating their babies, eating them. And it takes 90 minutes to wipe out a honeybee colony. And so that has huge economic implications for agriculture, because honeybees are important for, all kinds of different crops that need to be pollinated. But they also go after native insects. So that's an additional problem that would be harder to track. And then the other thing is they're big, terrifying, painful wasps that are very scary and attack people in swarms. And so we also don't want to be attacked by them. And their stingers are especially long and can go all the way through a honeybee keeper's suit. So the only way to protect yourself against these things is to wear basically like Kevlar. They're the scariest, they are very scary. I am terrified of them, and I'm very happy to be reporting that they are apparently eradicated from North America.
And I think it's important to underscore for people that you actually love insects and bugs and all things creepy crawly. So the fact that you hate them just lets us know how dangerous they are.
I didn't say I hate them. I respect them, and I'm very scared of them. But I'm very glad not to live with them, that's for sure.
Okay, to me, murder hornets are always associated with the pandemic, because I remember thinking, oh, now we have murder hornets. But there have been no reported sightings of murder hornets, at least in Canada and BC, since 2021. How did Washington finally get rid of them?
Yeah, so biologists jumped on the case very early, and that's something that very rarely happens with invasive species. Sometimes we wait until things get out of control before we really notice. But murder hornets were scary enough that people got on it right away. Tracking murder hornets, putting radio tags on them with dental floss, following them. They're big enough to do that. Following them back to their nest, cutting down the tree, moving it into a quarantine area, and then killing them one by one. They're huge. And the other thing is that they would smoke out a nest and think they'd killed them all. And when they brought it back to the lab, they'd find that they had not in fact killed them all. And just one tree could produce 200 queens. And so, are you getting all the nests? Are you killing all the hornets that are in those nests? So many things could have gone wrong. And basically just a really methodical system of traps set up in the habitat and asking people to please report any murder hornets they saw. People were very good about doing that, because everybody's scared of these things.
Yeah.
And they just managed to get all the nests apparently and smoke them all out. And so apparently, since we haven't seen one in 3 years, we think that they really are gone.
Thanks so much for being with us today. For more great conversations, download or hit subscribe to Your Morning the Podcast on the iHeartRadio app or wherever you get your podcasts.
And don't forget, we'd love for you to watch us live weekday mornings on CTV CTV News Channel, or on your CTV News app. Start your morning with us.